I adjusted my purse on my shoulder and pressed the bell at the familiar door. It was strange to ring the bell in my own house, but it had become routine in 2 years. I heard hurried footsteps on the hardwood flooring I'd once picked out myself at the flooring store on Main Street. Grandma! Brian opened the door and threw his arms around me. Tall, blonde, he always reminded me of my late husband. Come in soon, it's chilly outside. I walked into the hallway and looked around. Instead of my favorite coat rack, there was a modern metal structure and an abstract painting in bright colors hung on the wall. I took off my light coat and hung it on the hook. What's up, honey? Is Cassandra home? Of course, she's in the kitchen working on dinner. You know how she likes to experiment with recipes. We walked through the living room, where I noticed a new sand-colored leather couch. My old cozy set with the floral upholstery was gone. The coffee table was now glass, not wood like before. The shelves were filled with modern vases and figurines I'd never seen before. The walls were painted a trendy gray instead of the warm peach color I loved so much. Hello, Dorothy. Cassandra peeked out of the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon. The slender brunette with brown eyes always looked flawless, even when she was cooking. Just in time, making lasagna with a new recipe. I smiled and followed my sister-in-law. The kitchen had changed beyond recognition, too. My blue cabinets were now replaced by white glossy fronts, and the natural wood countertops were replaced by gray artificial stone. Even the curtains were different. Strict Roman curtains instead of cheerful chintz ones. The refrigerator had been moved to another corner, and a wine cabinet had been installed in its place, which hummed faintly. It's beautiful, I said, looking around the renovated space. It must have cost a lot, huh? Not really, Cassandra said, stirring the sauce. Brian found a good crew, and they gave me a discount for the amount of work. And the materials were discounted at the mall. You know, we're so lucky to have this house. The layout is perfect for modern design. I nodded. I remembered how Brian had come to me in tears 2 years ago, telling me about the layoffs at the auto parts plant. The young family was on the verge of bankruptcy, and the rented apartment had become an impossible burden. I didn't hesitate to offer them a place to live in the house, which had stood empty since my move to a smaller apartment in the center of Front Royal. Just for a few months until I get back on my feet, my grandson promised then. As soon as I get a job, we'll move right out. Brian did find a job pretty quickly. He got a job as a manager in a construction company, and the salary was even higher than before. But for some reason, they were in no hurry to move out. First, they explained that they were saving money for a deposit on a rented house. Then they started talking about how convenient it was to live in a house instead of a cramped apartment. Sit down. Cassandra pointed to a chair by the kitchen table. Tell me, how's it going? How's your new roommate? Mrs. Patterson? Quiet woman, we don't talk much. She watches TV all the time. I prefer to read. I sat down in the seat offered to me and looked out the window. The yard where my favorite roses used to grow was now tiled, with a modern barbecue grill in the center. The flower beds were gone, replaced by decorative pots of conifers. The apple tree that my husband and I had planted 30 years ago had been cut down, explaining that it was blocking the light from the windows. How's your back? Brian asked, sitting down next to me. Remember when you were complaining about the pain? It's better now. The doctor prescribed special exercises, and I do them every morning. When you're 70, you have to take extra care of your health. Cassandra put a glass of water in front of me and returned to the stove. She moved through the kitchen with the confidence of a full-fledged hostess, pulling dishes out of cupboards that had once been mine, using pots and pans bought with my money years ago. My favorite china service was now on the top shelf, apparently deemed too old-fashioned for everyday use. By the way, we wanted to consult with you, my sister-in-law began, not turning from the stove. We're thinking of remodeling the upstairs bedroom. The furniture is so old-fashioned. We want something more modern. And change the wallpaper. Those pinks are out of style. The old-fashioned furniture was the bedroom set I bought with my husband 40 years ago. Solid oak, beautifully crafted, had served faithfully all these years. Wallpaper with small roses I chose very carefully. They created coziness and reminded me of my childhood home. Do as you see fit, I said, as long as you're comfortable. Brian smiled and patted me on the shoulder. You're the best grandmother in the world, always there for us. You know, Cassandra was saying yesterday how lucky she is to have such a mother-in-law. A lot of her friends complain about the constant conflicts with her husband's in-laws. I looked at my sister-in-law, but she was busy making dinner. It's strange that she never said such words to me personally. Our relationship had always been polite but cool. Cassandra was a well-mannered girl, but I sensed that there was no genuine intimacy between us. Dinner is almost ready, Cassandra announced. Brian, set the table, please, and open that wine we bought yesterday. My grandson obediently set the plates on the very table where I'd once fed him as a child. The tabletop was the same, but the chairs had been replaced by modern ones with metal legs and leather seats. He got the wine from the new wine cabinet that hummed in the corner of the kitchen. Do you remember, Dorothy, how we used to live here in the early days? Cassandra asked, arranging the lasagna on plates. We were so scared about the whole job situation. We thought it was the end of the world. I remember, of course. You looked really confused back then. Yeah, it was a terrible time, Brian said. It's a good thing you helped us. I don't know what we would have done without this house. I nodded and picked up my fork. The lasagna was really good. Cassandra was a good cook. But as I ate, I kept looking around, noticing more and more changes. There were pictures of their seaside vacation hanging on the fridge that hadn't been there before. There were some exotic plants on the windowsill instead of my geraniums. By the way, Cassandra said, sipping her wine, we're thinking of putting up a higher fence. The neighbors are always peering into the yard, especially that Mrs. Coleman. She's so nosy. Mrs. Coleman was an old friend of mine. We used to chat over the low fence, swapping news and recipes. Now, apparently, it was getting in the way of the young ones. The fence is a good idea, I replied. Privacy is important. Right, Brian was excited. And we also want to put an awning over the patio, so we can grill even in the rain. I listened to their plans and thought about how quickly this house was no longer mine. Every decision they made distanced it from the place I once called home. But they seemed so happy discussing their projects that I didn't dare object. After dinner, I helped clear the table, though Cassandra protested, saying I was a guest and shouldn't be working. A guest in one's own home was a funny situation. But I didn't argue, just silently put the dishes in the dishwasher, which was also installed without my knowledge. Thank you for dinner. It was delicious, I said, getting ready to leave. I'll see you next week. Sure, Grandma. Come back anytime, Brian said as he hugged me goodbye. Just let me know beforehand in case we're busy with repairs or something. Cassandra hugged me too, but in a formal way, as if she were doing her duty. Say hello to your neighbor, she said. What's her name? Patterson? I walked out of the house and headed for my car. I turned around and looked at the familiar windows, which were now filled with warm light. In the living room, the silhouettes of Brian and Cassandra were already sitting on the new couch. They were watching TV and looked perfectly happy in their new world. As I got into the car, I thought about the house having a life of its own, in which I was a rare guest. The young ones were grateful and polite, but I felt that I was gradually becoming to them just a nice old lady relative who occasionally dropped in for a visit. On Wednesday, I went to Brian and Cassandra's house again. This time, I carried bags of groceries from the supermarket. I bought what I thought they could use: meat for Sunday lunch, fresh vegetables, good cheese, and the yogurts my grandson had loved so much since he was a kid. Parking in front of the house, I pulled 3 heavy bags out of the trunk. My back was a little sore from the strain, but I was used to handling myself. At 70, you shouldn't rely on other people's help, even in small things. The doorbell this time went unanswered. I waited and rang again. Finally, the door opened, and Cassandra appeared on the doorstep, wearing a housecoat and a towel on her head. "Oh, Dorothy, hi," she said without much enthusiasm. "Sorry, I was washing my hair. I didn't hear you right away." "That's okay, honey. I brought some groceries I thought I might need." Cassandra looked at the bags in my hands and frowned. "Why would you do that? We go to the store by ourselves. We have a shopping list. We plan our menus ahead of time." I felt slightly awkward, but smiled. "I just wanted to help. You know how expensive everything is these days." "Thanks, but next time, you better warn me. You might buy something we already have." We walked into the kitchen, and I set the bags on the countertop. Cassandra reluctantly began sorting through the groceries, commenting on each purchase. "This yogurt is too fatty. We buy non-fat. And the cheese. We don't eat cheese that sharp. It gives Brian heartburn." I nodded and felt increasingly stupid. It seemed like I should know my grandson's tastes, but they must have changed in the last 2 years. "Where's Brian?" I asked to change the subject. "At work, of course. They have an important client meeting today, and he'll be back late." Cassandra put the groceries away in the refrigerator and cupboards, clearly in a hurry to get it done. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, unsure of what to do next. "Why don't we have tea?" I suggested. "Okay," my sister-in-law agreed, but there was no joy in her voice. While she put the kettle on, I looked around the kitchen more carefully. On the refrigerator, there were new magnets from different places. Apparently, the young people traveled a lot. There were magnets from Washington, D.C., New York, even Miami. I didn't remember them telling me about the trips. "Do you go on vacation a lot?" I asked, pointing to the magnets. "Sometimes, on weekends. Brian likes to see new places. There's not much to do here in Front Royal." She sounded disappointed in our small town. Cassandra had grown up in Richmond and apparently missed the big city. We sat down at the table with cups of flavored tea. Cassandra toweled off her head, her dark hair still damp. "How are things going at work?" I asked. "It's okay. I get all sorts of clients, some of them very cranky. Yesterday, one lady spent 2 hours trying to decide what color nail polish she wanted. It must be hard to work with people." "Yeah, especially with older clients. They're so picky. Everything's wrong with them. The water's hot, the water's cold, the music's loud." I felt a pang. Did I seem like a cranky old lady to her? "Do you often do your own manicures?" I asked, looking at her flawless nails. "Of course, it's my job. I have to be an example for my clients." We were silent, drinking tea. The house was silent, interrupted only by the ticking of the new wall clock in the shape of a sun, another acquisition of the young. "By the way," Cassandra said, "we wanted to talk to you about something. Couldn't you call before your visits? Sometimes we're busy or we have guests, and it's inconvenient." "Of course I'll call," I replied, trying not to show that the words hurt. "It's just that before you said that I could come any time." "Yes, but now we have a more active social life. Friends come over often. We have dinners, you know?" "I understand. My company was no longer welcome in their new life. How about I help cook dinner for the guests?" I suggested it. "You know I'm a good cook." Cassandra shook her head. "Thank you, but that's okay. We're fine on our own. Besides, our friends have specific tastes, and they prefer modern cuisine. Modern cooking versus my old recipes is another divide between us." After tea, I offered to help clean up, but Cassandra again declined. She clearly wanted to be alone. I said goodbye and promised to be sure to call ahead next time. I did call on Saturday, as agreed. Brian answered the phone. Hi, Grandma. How's it going? I'm good, honey. I wanted to stop by if you don't mind. I made your favorite apple pie. Oh, that's great. Sure, come on over. We're home. We're not going anywhere. I was glad to finally get a normal reaction. I took the pie and a small bouquet of flowers from my balcony garden and drove to the young couple's house. Brian greeted me happily, hugging me and smelling the pie. I missed him so much. Cassandra is trying to bake too, but it's not as good. We walked into the living room where Cassandra was watching TV. She said hello to me and even smiled, but I could tell it was a strained smile. The flowers are beautiful, she said, taking the bouquet. I'll put them in a vase. While my sister-in-law fiddled with the flowers, Brian cut the cake and put the kettle on. The three of us sat down at the table, and I felt the atmosphere was friendlier than it had been on Wednesday. How are things going at work, Brian? I asked. Great. We've been promoted. I'm a senior manager now. The salary has gone up quite a bit, too. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Yes, we can afford more now, Cassandra added. We're thinking of buying a new car. This one is old. I looked out the window at their car, an ordinary 5-year-old model, quite decent. But I guess the young people wanted something better. Do you have plans for a vacation? I asked. Of course. Brian got excited. We want to go to Europe, to Italy. Cassandra has been dreaming of Venice for a long time. That's wonderful. You deserve a good vacation. We talked about traveling, work, future plans. I tried to keep the conversation going, to ask questions, but I felt I was listening more than participating. The young people talked about their lives as if they were reporting to a distant relative. After tea, Brian turned on the TV and we watched a show. I didn't really understand what was happening on the screen. Modern programs seemed too noisy and pointless, but the young people were laughing and commenting, clearly enjoying themselves. Maybe I could help clean up a bit, I suggested during the commercial break. I see there's a lot of dust accumulating. Cassandra looked at me in surprise. Dorothy, we do our own cleaning. We have a cleaning schedule. Yes, Grandma, said my grandson. We're adults. We can do it ourselves. I nodded, but I felt redundant. Before, when Brian was a boy and came to visit me on vacation, I had always found things for him to do. Help in the garden, cook dinner, clean the rooms. Now, my help wasn't needed. Time stretched slowly. I sat in the chair that had once stood in my living room and watched a program I didn't like. The young ones were around, but I felt lonely. I guess I should go, I said when the show was over. I have to get up early tomorrow, and I have a doctor's appointment. Are you in pain? Brian asked with a little concern. No, just a routine checkup. At our age, you should get regular checkups. Sure, take care of yourself, Cassandra said, but there wasn't much concern in her voice. Brian walked me to my car and thanked me again for the pie. I got behind the wheel and waved to them. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the doorway, a young, beautiful couple near their house. Their house, not mine. All the way to my apartment, I thought about how our relationship had changed. I had tried to be a helpful, caring grandmother, but with each visit I realized more and more that I was becoming a burden. My gifts were useless, my help unnecessary, and my presence rather tolerated out of politeness. At home, I made myself some tea and sat by the window. It was getting dark outside, and the streetlights were coming on one by one. I thought about the house where I had spent the best years of my life, where I had raised my son and then rejoiced over my grandson. It was now inhabited by other people who were slowly erasing all traces of my presence. Friday night, I received a phone call from Brian. His voice was excited, joyful. Grandma, we're having a party tomorrow. We're inviting friends over to celebrate my promotion. Come if you want to, around 7 o'clock in the evening. I was happy to be invited. Finally, I was included in their plans. They wanted to share the joy with me. Of course I'll come. Do you need anything to cook? No, we'll be fine. Just come over. Maybe I'll make something. A salad or an appetizer. Brian was silent for a moment, apparently consulting with Cassandra. Well, if you want, you can make your signature shrimp salad. Remember you always made it for the holidays? Of course I do. I'll make it. Saturday morning, I went to the market for fresh shrimp and vegetables. I wanted to make everything perfect, to show my young friends that my grandson was brought up in a good family. I chose the best products, did not save on money. At home, I spent a few hours on preparation. I boiled shrimp to perfection, cut vegetables into thin slices, prepared a special sauce according to the recipe that my mother passed on to me. To the salad, I added a puff pastry with mushrooms, another of our family's specialties. By 7 p.m., I was ready. I put on my best blue dress that I bought for a friend's golden wedding, tinted my lips, and even styled my hair. I wanted to look dignified in front of the young men. As I drove up to the house, I noticed several unfamiliar cars in the yard. One was very expensive, a shiny black Jeep with chrome parts. Brian and Cassandra must have had wealthy friends. I didn't ring the doorbell because they were waiting for me. I entered quietly through the side door, as I'd always done when I'd lived here. There was music in the house, laughter and conversation. Cassandra was in the kitchen, fussing over the stove. She was dressed in an elegant black dress, her hair in an elaborate style, her makeup flawless. "Oh, Dorothy," she exclaimed, turning around. "You're here already? Good, just in time." I put my dishes on the counter. I brought the salad and pie, as agreed. Cassandra caught a glimpse of my creations. "Thank you, of course. Put it in the fridge for now, then we'll put it on the table." There wasn't much gratitude in her tone. She was clearly preoccupied with her own affairs, and my help didn't seem important to her. "What else is there to do?" I asked, tying my apron. "Should I chop vegetables or serve drinks?" "No, it's almost done. The guests are already in the living room. Come and meet them." I took off my apron and went to the guests. There were 8 people in the living room, young couples about Brian and Cassandra's age. They were all dressed fashionably, holding wine glasses and talking animatedly. "There's our grandmother," Brian announced loudly when he saw me. "This is Dorothy, my favorite grandmother." Everyone turned to me with polite smiles. Brian began introducing the guests: Jason and Emily, Cole and Rachel, Tyler and Savannah, some other couple. The names blended together in my head. The faces seemed equally young and beautiful. "It's so nice to meet you," I said to each one, shaking hands. "Oh, how nice of you to come," said one of the girls. I think it was Emily. "Brian has told me so much about you." I sat down in the chair that used to be in my bedroom, but had now moved into the living room. The young people were continuing the conversation that I had interrupted by my appearance. They were talking about people I didn't know, places I hadn't been, movies I hadn't seen. "Remember when we went to that new club in Winchester last month?" Rachel asked. "Of course, the music was amazing, and we danced till morning," Savannah said. "Yeah, and then we went to that bar by the lake. The cocktails were unbelievable." As I listened to them talk, I realized that I didn't fit in with them at all. They discussed nightclubs, expensive restaurants, fancy resorts. Their lives were full of entertainment and pleasures that were foreign to me. "Dorothy, where did you work?" Emily suddenly turned to me, apparently out of politeness. "I was a secretary in the school administration," I answered. 35 years. "Oh, how interesting," said the girl, but there was no genuine interest in her voice. "You must have seen a lot of children." "Yes, several generations of students." The conversation turned to their topics again. I sat in silence, nodding and smiling occasionally. Every now and then, one of the guests would glance at me, but quickly switched back to the general conversation. Brian brought me a glass of wine, but I asked for water instead. Alcohol at my age isn't a good idea, especially when you have to drive home afterward. By the way, have you seen the new collection at Michael Kors? One of the girls asked. The handbags there are incredible. I have. I want that red one, but the price is too steep, said another. Wait until the sales. There are always good discounts at the end of the season. They were discussing purchases that cost more than my monthly pension. They talked about it lightly, as if they were talking about buying bread at the store. After half an hour, Cassandra called everyone to the table. The table was set beautifully: white tablecloths, candles, beautiful dishes. My dishes stood aside, on the edge of the table, as if they were a secondary addition to the main menu. Well, friends, Brian began, raising his glass, let's celebrate my promotion. I'm a senior manager now, and Cassandra and I can afford even more goodies. Everyone raised their glasses and clapped. I raised my water glass too and smiled. To Brian, shouted the guests. To success, to youth. They drank and laughed, and I felt like an extra at the party. My grandson was happy, surrounded by friends his own age, and my role here was purely symbolic. The guests began to taste the dishes. The main attention was attracted by the exquisite appetizers that Cassandra had prepared. Some tartlets with exotic fillings, rolls with red fish, salad with avocado and shrimp. My simple salad and cake were barely touched. Cassie, you're a real chef, Emily marveled. Where did you learn to cook like that? I found recipes on the internet. There are so many interesting ideas. And this avocado salad is divine. Can I have the recipe? Of course, it's very simple. It's all about quality products. I sat and listened to my daughter-in-law's culinary talents being praised. No one paid any attention to my dishes. The pie remained almost untouched, and only a few spoonfuls of salad were taken. Do you, Dorothy, cook too? One of the young men, Cole, I think, asked. A little, I answered modestly. Grandma's a great cook, Brian intervened. She used to feed me such delicious things when I was a kid. But now we prefer modern cooking. Modern cooking versus old family recipes. Another hint that my time is gone. After dinner, everyone went back to the living room. They turned up the music louder. Someone suggested dancing. The young couples started moving to the rhythm of modern songs that I was completely unfamiliar with. I remained seated in the chair, watching the fun. Every now and then someone would approach, asking how things were going, but the conversations were short and polite. I felt that to this company I was more an object of interior decoration than a full participant in the party. Dorothy, would you like to dance? Tyler offered, apparently out of politeness. Thank you, sweetheart, but I'm not the type to dance to this kind of music, I said with a smile. I know, I know. Well then, sit down and rest. He went back to his girlfriend and they danced again. All the guests were absorbed in the fun, and I sat aside like a statue in a museum. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, some of the company went out on the terrace to smoke and get some fresh air. I decided to seize the moment and help Cassandra clear the table. The kitchen was full of dirty dishes and leftovers. Let me help, I said, starting to pick up the plates. There's no need, Dorothy, Cassandra said. We'll clean it up tomorrow, but the dishes will get dirty if you leave them overnight. All right, well, just put them in the sink. I began to stack the plates carefully, rinsing off the leftovers. The work was familiar, even soothing. At least here I could be useful. Through the open patio doors, laughter and conversation could be heard. The voices were loud, excited with alcohol and merriment. I wasn't specifically listening, but individual phrases came through clearly. Cassie, is your mother-in-law always so active? Asked someone's female voice. I froze with a plate in my hands. They were talking about me. Yeah, she's always hanging around, Cassandra answered, and there was a tiredness in her voice. She comes every 2 days, bringing groceries, offering to help. You know, she wants what's best, but sometimes it's stressful. Oh, yes, I understand, said another girl. My friend has the same situation. The mother in law literally does not let them live. Well, it's not that she doesn't, Cassandra continued. It's just that she's used to this house being hers, and now we live here. It's like she can't let go. What does Brian say? Brian adores her, obviously. She's the perfect grandmother for him, but he doesn't understand what it's like to be told how to live your life all the time. My hands were shaking as I put the plate in the sink. So that's what they think of me, that I'm an annoying old woman who's interfering with their lives. Have you thought about moving out? A man's voice asked. Where to? Cassandra laughed. This house is perfect. The neighborhood is nice. Brian's job is close by, and it's crazy expensive to rent right now. No, we just need to explain to Dorothy in a gentle way that we're adults. I see. Well, hang in there. It's only temporary. Old people don't last forever. That last sentence sounded like a judgment. They were waiting for me to die so they could live in peace in my house. I put down the last plate and wiped my hands with a towel. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid I was going to have a seizure. I had to get out of here now before I burst into tears in the kitchen. The company returned from the terrace, laughter and music filling the house again. I waited until everyone was seated in the living room and quietly approached Brian. Honey, I'm going home now, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. What, already? He sounded surprised. We were going to sing karaoke. I'm a little tired, and I have to get up early tomorrow. All right, Grandma, thank you for coming, and thanks for the treats. He hugged me, and I could smell the alcohol. Cassandra waved at me from the living room, where she was chatting merrily with her friends. Goodbye, Dorothy. Thanks for your help. I said goodbye to all the guests, who responded politely, keeping up their conversations. No one seemed particularly upset that I was leaving. In the car, I just sat there for a few minutes, catching my breath. Cassandra's words rang in my ears. Always sticking around, won't let me live. Old people don't last forever. So I really was a burden to them, an annoying old lady they wanted to get rid of. All the way home, I thought about how blind I had been all this time. I mistook their politeness for hospitality, their patience for love, their condescension for concern, and they were just waiting for me to leave them alone. At home, I couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying every detail of the evening in my head. My untouched dishes, the indifferent stares of my guests, my sister-in-law's words on the terrace. It all added up to an unsightly picture. I was an extra in my grandson's life. The week after the party was a week of painful reflection. I tried to forget Cassandra's words, convinced myself that I had simply misunderstood them or that my daughter-in-law had spoken under the influence of alcohol. But I couldn't sleep, my appetite was gone, and even my favorite books didn't please me. I had the same thought in my head. Had I really become a burden for the only close family? On Thursday evening, I couldn't bear to sit at home alone. I decided to visit the young people, but this time without gifts and treats. Just come, talk, try to understand what is really going on between us. I did not call in advance. I wanted to see their normal life, without preparation and strained smiles. Besides, I'd always come unannounced before, and no one minded. As I parked in front of the house, I noticed that all the windows were brightly lit, and music was coming from the living room. Apparently, the young ones were home and weren't going to bed early. I went to the front door and was about to ring the bell, but suddenly I heard voices from the terrace. Brian and Cassandra were sitting outside, talking and apparently drinking wine. I stopped, not daring to interrupt their conversation. The terrace was clearly visible from the side of the house where my favorite lilacs used to grow. They were sitting in wicker chairs with their backs to me, a bottle of wine and a plate of appetizers on the table between them. Do you know what I'm thinking? Cassandra said, sipping from her glass. We need to work something out with your grandmother. I froze around the corner of the house. They were talking about me, and I instinctively held my breath. What do you mean? Brian asked. Well, you see how often she comes here. Every 2 or 3 days, she's always here with groceries or pies, or just for fun. And she's always unhappy about something. The furniture's wrong. The flowers are wrong. We're not living right. Cassie, she wants to help. Brian, understand. Her sister-in-law set her glass down on the table with a soft clatter. I'm 30 years old. I'm a grown woman, and she acts like I'm a child who can't cook, clean, or make decisions. Did you hear the way she commented on my curtain choices last week? Or when she saw the new plates? I mean, she's used to this being her house. Exactly. That's the problem. She still thinks of it as her house, and us as temporary tenants. We've lived here for 2 years. It's our life, our space. I felt my insides clench with pain. Had I really been so intrusive? I just wanted to be a part of their lives, to help, to care. Maybe we should talk to her, Brian suggested, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Talk about what? What to say to an old woman? That she was boring us with her visits? Cassandra sighed. You know, I understand that she's lonely in that apartment, but we can't be the only meaning in her life. Yes, you're right, my grandson agreed, and those words hit me harder than anything else. Sometimes I feel guilty that we live in her house, but what? We pay the utilities, keep the house in order, have even improved it. It's a fair trade. Sure, but it's still awkward. And then there's her insinuating that we're doing something wrong. Last week, she spent an hour telling us how to water potted plants properly. Cassandra laughed, but it was an irritated laugh. And remember when she brought that awful salad to the party and was so offended that the guests wouldn't eat it? Brian, your friends are modern people. They're not going to eat old-fashioned food. The salad wasn't that bad, his grandson weakly objected. Maybe, but this isn't about the salad. It's that she's trying to fit in with us, and it looks, you know, ridiculous. I stood around the corner of the house, tears welling up in my throat. So I really did look ridiculous among their young friends. A silly old woman trying to be needed. What do you suggest? Brian asked after a long pause. I don't know. Maybe we should limit her visits. Say we're busy with work, personal matters. Or, she paused, or find her some other interests. Knitting club, retirement club, something like that. Retirement club. They wanted to put me with the other old people so I wouldn't interfere with their young lives. Cassie, that's my grandmother, Brian said, but there was no firmness in his voice. She raised me after my parents died, always there for me. And I appreciate that, I really do. But it's a different time now. We have our own lives, our own plans. We want kids, we want to travel, build a career, and the constant control from the older generation. It's not control, it's care, my grandson tried to defend me. Brian, my daughter-in-law's voice became serious. Tell me honestly, don't you feel constrained when she's here? Don't you feel like we can't relax, be ourselves? A long pause. I stood there praying for Brian to say no, to protect me, to take my side. But he didn't. Okay, he finally said. Maybe you're right. Maybe we do need more space. It sounded like a sentence. My own grandson, whom I loved more than life, agreed that I was unnecessary in their lives. You see, Cassandra continued, it's not that we don't love her, it's just, she's a pain. She's small and unnoticeable, but she's a constant reminder of herself, and she's a pain in the ass, a splinter. I've been called a splinter, a woman who lived in my house for 2 years, used my furniture, slept in my bed, called me a splinter. A splinter is harsh, Brian objected weakly. But accurate, Cassandra insisted. You know I'm right. Tell me honestly, when was the last time you were really glad to see her? Not out of a sense of duty, not because it was customary, but genuinely glad? Another pause, and again my grandson was silent. See, said my daughter-in-law triumphantly. You can't answer because there are no such moments. We tolerate her visits out of politeness. But she's single. Brian, we don't have to entertain a lonely senior citizen. We have our own lives. And if we don't set boundaries now, in a few years, she's gonna move in here for good. Can you imagine? Your grandmother will live with us, control our every move, meddle in all our affairs. You think it'll come to that? I'm sure it will. People like that never stop. First, it's frequent visits. Then she'll want the keys to the house. Then she'll start staying overnight. Okay, I get it. Brian stopped her. You're right. We have to do something. I couldn't listen anymore. My heart was beating so loud I thought they'd hear it even on the terrace. I quietly backed away from the house, trying not to make a sound. I reached the car on shaky legs. I sat behind the wheel for a few minutes, trying to digest what I'd heard. A splinter. They think I'm a pain. Not a loving grandmother, not a caring relative, but a thorn in their side. All my attempts to be helpful, all the gifts, treats, household help, all this was perceived as intrusive. I thought I was giving them love and care, but it turned out that I was just annoying and interfering. I started the car and slowly drove home. All the way home, their words kept running through my head. A pain in the ass, a nuisance, tolerated out of politeness. How could I have been so wrong about people? How could I not notice their irritation? At home, I sat by the window and began to think about what to do next. I could just stop visiting, limit my communication to phone calls on holidays. I could pretend I hadn't heard anything and go on with my life as before. But something inside me resisted that option. Why should I endure the humiliation? Why should I pretend not to know their true attitude toward me? And then I remembered, the house is in my name. I'd never signed it over to Brian, only authorized him to live there. Technically, I was still the rightful owner. The thought seemed absurd to me at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had an opportunity to show them what it was like to be truly superfluous in their lives. If I'm a pain in the ass, let them know what it's like to have a pain disappear with the house. I stayed up all night thinking about the plan. By morning, the decision was final. No more humiliating visits, feigned politeness, and out of a sense of duty patience. If they considered me a burden, I would free them from that burden once and for all. But first, I had to think things through carefully. Contact a realtor, find out the market value of the house, prepare the documents. I wanted it to go quickly and without the possibility of reversing the decision. On Friday morning, I went downtown to a real estate company near City Hall. I chose the most experienced agent, a middle-aged man named Stephen Craig, who had been in the real estate market for 15 years. I want to sell the house, I said, sitting down in the chair across from his desk. Of course, Mrs. Clark. Tell me the details, where the property is, how big it is, what condition it's in. I told him everything he wanted to know. Stephen made notes in his notebook, asked follow-up questions. The house is in a good neighborhood. The condition is excellent, he summarized. Approximate market value, from $250,000 to $300,000, depending on the specific characteristics. When can I see it? And how fast can I sell it? I asked instead of answering. With the right price and good condition, quite quickly. The market is active now. There is demand. A month and a half tops. That's great. And what do you need for registration? Property documents, passport, certificate of absence of debts for utilities. If there's anyone currently registered in the house, you'll need their consent to sell. I'm tense. I hadn't thought about registration. What if the tenants don't give their consent? Then you can't sell. The registered citizens have the right to housing. But if they're not registered, but just live, then there's no problem. The owner has the right to dispose of his real estate. I remembered, when the young people moved out, there was no question of registration. They just moved their things and lived in the house. So, legally, there was no obstacle. Okay, I said. When can you come for an inspection? And who lives in the house now? Specified the realtor. Relatives, but they are aware of the situation. I lied. Then tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Will it fit? It's fine. I signed the preliminary agreement and received a list of necessary documents. I felt strange, both scared and relieved at the same time. I'd taken the first step, and there was no turning back. I spent the rest of the day collecting documents. Fortunately, all the papers were kept in order at home, a habit developed through years of working in school administration. By evening, I was ready. Tomorrow, Stephen would look at the house. We'd discuss the details and the price. Then I'd call Brian with the news. Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The dream was disturbing, full of fragments of last night's conversation on the terrace. The word splinter sounded in my head like a drumbeat, but the decision did not change. On the contrary, it became even firmer. At 9:30, I was dressed and ready to go to the house. Stephen was due at 10, and I wanted to be there early enough to warn the young people about the realtor's visit. Let it be a surprise to them, but a little preparatory period would be fair. On the way, I pondered exactly how to tell Brian and Cassandra of my decision. I could announce the sale right away, but that would seem too abrupt. It would be better to start with a visit from the realtor and then explain the situation. As I parked in front of the house, I noticed that the bedroom curtains were still drawn. The young ones must have been asleep. They like to sleep in on Saturday after the work week, but I'd have to wake them up. I rang the doorbell and waited. A few minutes later, Brian appeared in his home clothes, sleepy and disheveled. "Grandma?" he said in surprise. "Is something wrong? You don't usually come in this early." "Good morning, sweetie. I'm sorry to wake you. I just need to talk to you about something." "Sure, come on in. Do you want coffee?" "I'd love some." We went into the kitchen, where Brian turned on the coffee maker. I sat down at the table and tried to look calm, though my insides were shaking with excitement. "Where's Cassandra?" I asked. "Still sleeping. She was up late last night celebrating a friend's birthday." Brian yawned and rubbed his eyes. "You look a little strange. Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine. I just need to warn you about one thing. There's a man coming here at 10 o'clock this morning. On business." "What business? What business?" I took a deep breath. "A realtor. Stephen Craig from Front Royal Properties. He'll be looking at the house." Brian froze with a cup in his hand. "Inspecting? What for?" "To assess the market value." "Grandma, I don't understand. Why do you need an appraisal?" I looked him in the eye and said the hardest words of my life. "Because I'm selling the house." For a few seconds, there was dead silence in the kitchen. Brian looked at me as if I'd said something in a foreign language. "You... what?" He finally let it out. "I'm selling the house. I signed a preliminary contract with a realtor yesterday." The cup fell out of my grandson's hands and shattered on the tile floor. The hot coffee spilled out in a puddle, but Brian didn't even notice. But why?" he whispered. "What happened?" "Nothing much happened. I just made a decision." "What decision?" "Grandma, are you out of your mind? We live here." "I know you live here, and I know how you feel about it." At that moment, Cassandra appeared in the kitchen in a silk robe, with a sleepy face and disheveled hair. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking at the shattered cup and the puddle of coffee. Brian, are you breaking dishes? Cassie, the grandson said hoarsely. Grandma says she's selling the house. The daughter-in-law was instantly awake. She shifted her gaze from Brian to me, and I saw disbelief mixed with fear in her eyes. Is this a joke? She asked. No, I answered calmly. I meant it. A realtor will be here at 10 in the morning to look at the property. Cassandra sank into the chair across from me. Her face turned pale. Dorothy, but why? We live well. We don't bother anyone. Not bothering anyone? I asked her again, and for the first time in a while, my voice sounded harsh. That's interesting. What do you mean? Brian was wary. Nothing in particular. I've just decided it's time for a change. But where are we going to go? Cassandra exclaimed. We're not ready to move, and we don't have the money for a security deposit. That's your problem, I said coldly. I'm not kicking anyone out immediately. The sale will take time, so you'll have time to figure something out. Brian clutched his head. Grandma, I don't understand anything. Yesterday everything was fine, and today you suddenly decided to sell the house. What happened? I could have told the truth. I could tell you about the conversation I overheard, the way they called me a pain in the ass. But why? Let them figure it out for themselves. It wasn't a big deal. I just decided I didn't want to own this house anymore. But why now? Cassandra insisted. We can discuss if there are any problems. There's no problem. I just want to sell. And the money? Brian asked. Do you need money? We can help. I almost laughed. They were offering to help me financially by living for free in my house. I don't need money. I just want to get rid of some extra real estate. Unnecessary? Cassandra was indignant. It's a family home. It was a family home, I corrected. Now it's just a house I don't need anymore. The doorbell rang at that moment. I glanced at my watch. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Stephen Craig was a punctual man. It's the realtor, I said, getting up from the table. I'll go get it. Wait, Brian said. Let's talk about this properly first. There's nothing to discuss. The decision's been made. I headed for the door, leaving the young people in a state of shock. I could hear their excited voices behind me. Cassie, do you understand anything? I don't understand anything. It's like she's lost her mind. We have to do something. But what? The house is in her name. Stephen Craig was a nice man in a suit, briefcase in hand, and a professional smile. Good morning, Mrs. Clark. Ready to show the house? Sure. Come on in. We entered the hallway where Brian and Cassandra greeted us. The young ones looked confused and frightened. This is my grandson Brian and his wife Cassandra. I introduced them. They are living here temporarily, but are aware of the situation. Stephen nodded and extended his hand for a handshake. Stephen Craig, Front Royal Properties. May I see the premises? Brian shook the outstretched hand, but he looked like a man in a trance. Sure, I answered for him. Let's start in the living room. The next hour was spent looking around the house. Stephen professionally assessed each room, taking pictures, taking measurements. Brian and Cassandra followed us like shadows, occasionally answering the realtor's questions about utilities and appliances. The house is in excellent condition, Stephen summarized when we finished the inspection. The repairs are fresh and all the systems are working. I think we can count on the upper end of the price range. How much is that? Cassandra asked in a weak voice. About $280,000. With the right pitch and a little better presentation, we could even get to $300,000. I saw the young men's eyes widen. Such a sum was out of their reach. When can you place an ad? I asked. Today, if we sign the contract. By Monday, the photos will be ready and we'll start showing. Great. But let me clarify, Stephen interjected. Will the tenants have to vacate the house by the time of the sale? Naturally, I replied. The house is being sold free of encumbrances. Brian and Cassandra looked at each other. There was a look of desperation in their eyes. After the realtor left, the three of us stayed in the kitchen. The young people sat in silence while I cleaned up the shards of the broken cup. Grandma, Brian finally said, tell me honestly, what's the matter? What did we do wrong? We didn't do anything, I replied, throwing the shards into the trash can. I just don't want to own this house anymore. Is it because of the money? Cassandra asked. We can start paying rent. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Brian exploded. You can't just throw us out on the street. I'm not throwing anyone out. It'll take a month and a half to sell, so you have time to find another place to live. A month and a half? My daughter-in-law was horrified. Dorothy, that's impossible. We have to save up for the mortgage, find a suitable apartment, draw up the papers. You should have thought of that before, I said coldly. Earlier? My grandson interrogated. Think about what? We were living normally. Normal. It was normal for them to call me a pain behind my back. We did, I agreed, and now you're going to live somewhere else. But why? Cassandra was almost shouting. Explain what we're guilty of. I looked at her for a long moment, the beautiful, young, confident woman who had called me a pain yesterday. Now she looked scared and confused. It's not your fault, I said calmly. It's just that I've made my decision, and it's final. But that's not fair, Brian exclaimed. We've invested money, time, and effort into this house. We've renovated it. We've bought furniture. You can take the furniture with you. And the repairs. I shrugged. Renovations increase the value of the house, so thank you. Cassandra suddenly started to cry. Quietly, without sobbing, just tears running down her cheeks. Dorothy, you can't do this. We're family. Family. That's an interesting word coming from a man who thinks I'm a pain in the ass. Family is when people respect each other, I said. I guess there's no respect here. What respect? Brian didn't understand. We've always respected you. Always? I questioned him. Are you sure? Something in my tone silenced him. Cassandra stopped crying too and looked at me warily. What are you talking about? She asked quietly. Nothing in particular, just that everything has an end, and your life in this house has come to an end too. I grabbed my purse and headed for the exit. Where are you going? Brian called out to me. Home, to my apartment. You guys figure out what to do next. Wait, he caught up with me at the door. Let's at least have a normal conversation. No emotions, calmly. I'm absolutely calm, I replied, and there's nothing to talk about. The decision has been made. But we can fix it. If there are any problems, I turned to him. Brian, the only problem is that I've been a naive old lady for too long, but that's fixed now. I don't understand. You will sooner or later. I left the house and headed for the car. There were voices behind me. Brian, what do we do now? I don't know. Maybe she'll change her mind. I don't think so. As I drove, I took one last look at the house. Brian and Cassandra were silhouetted in the kitchen window. They were talking about something, probably discussing the situation. I wondered if they were calling me a pain right now. Monday morning, I got a call from Brian. He sounded tired, like he'd been up all night. Grandma, we need to talk. A serious talk. We already talked on Saturday, I replied as I continued to water the flowers on the balcony. What else? About the house, about our situation. Can I come over? Sure, just let me know in advance. Remember, you said it was better this way. He arrived an hour later with Cassandra. They both looked exhausted and worried. I offered them coffee, but they declined. Dorothy, Cassandra began, sitting down on the edge of the couch. We've been thinking about what you said all night. We can't figure out what we did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, I replied, sitting down in the chair across from her. I told you. Then why did you? Brian insisted. Why such a drastic decision all of a sudden? Why do I have to explain my decisions? The house is mine. I can sell it if I want. But we're close people, exclaimed the daughter-in-law. We must have honesty in our relationship. Honesty. That's a funny word coming from a man who discussed me behind my back with his friends. Honesty is good, I agreed, but the decision is still mine. Grandma, at least give us time, my grandson begged. A month and a half is not enough. We need to find an apartment to save up for a deposit. How much time do you need? The young people looked at each other hopefully. Well, 6 months, Cassandra suggested cautiously. We'll find something in 6 months. 6 months is a long time. I shook my head. The house is already on the market. What if we bought it? Brian suddenly asked. Take out a loan? Buy it from you? You don't have that kind of money. But we could try. Go to the bank, take out a mortgage. $280,000? I grinned. On your salary. Brian lowered his head. He realized that even with his recent raise, they couldn't afford it. Then maybe you could sell it to us at a discount, Cassandra suggested timidly. As in-laws? Why would I sell at a discount what I can sell at market value? Because we're family, Brian snapped. Because you raised me, you loved me. Is money more important than family? Family ties, I said thoughtfully. Interesting topic. What do you think family ties mean? Mutual support, understanding, love, and respect. And respect? Of course, and respect. Then tell me, where has your respect been all this time? Where has it been? Confused grandson. We have always respected you. Always? I looked at them carefully. Never once said anything unpleasant about me? Cassandra turned pale. Something in my words made her tense. What are you talking about? She asked cautiously. Nothing in particular, just wondering about your definition of respect. Dorothy, if we said something wrong, I apologize, my sister-in-law began. Sometimes people speak out of haste. In the heat of the moment? I questioned her. Are there any sincere conversations? The young people looked at each other. I could see that they were beginning to understand the direction of the conversation. Grandma, Brian said quietly, did you hear something? I hear a lot of things. The house is mine, and I have a right to be in it. When? Cassandra whispered. Does it matter? What matters is that now I know how you really feel about me. There was a long pause. Cassandra stared at the floor, Brian nervously tugging at the edge of his shirt. If you've heard something unpleasant, his grandson finally said, it doesn't mean we don't love you. It doesn't? I raised an eyebrow. What does it mean? It's just, sometimes people have misunderstandings. It's normal. Misunderstandings, I repeated. So I misunderstood what you said? Dorothy, Cassandra interjected. If I said something offensive, I apologize, but it can be undone, can it? You can, I agreed. I am. I'm selling the house. But that's not fixing it. That's revenge, Brian shrieked. Revenge? I looked at him in surprise. What makes you think that? It's just a decision to sell the property. Come on, Grandma. You're doing this on purpose to punish us. Punish us for what? You didn't do anything wrong. You said so yourself. Brian got up and started pacing the room. Okay, let's say we said something wrong, but people are entitled to private conversations. You can't judge us for our private opinions. I'm not judging, I replied calmly. I'm just drawing conclusions. What conclusions? That it would be better for you to live apart from me, in your own house, where you can say whatever you want without anyone hearing you. But we don't have the money for a house of our own, Cassandra exclaimed. Then rent, or buy something more modest. Dorothy, be reasonable. She tried a different approach. We're a young family. We're just starting out in life. This house gives us a chance to get on our feet, to save money. At my expense, I added. Well, yes, but we're a family. Isn't it natural for the older generation to help the younger? It's natural when there is mutual respect and gratitude, and when the younger generation thinks that help is due and complains about the benefactors. We weren't complaining, Brian interrupted me. No? What do you call it? We were just, discussing the situation amongst ourselves. Discussing. I see. I got up and went to the window. It was beautiful fall weather outside. The leaves on the trees had turned yellow and were rustling beautifully in the wind. You know what I've realized over the years? I said without turning around. That you can't force people to be grateful. If a person does not feel gratitude naturally, no words and actions will awaken it. We are grateful, Cassandra exclaimed. Of course we are grateful. We are now, when you realized you might lose your home. And before? Before, too. Then why did you discuss my shortcomings with your friends? Cassandra was silent. She had nothing to say. Grandma, Brian said softly, it's human nature to criticize each other sometimes. It doesn't mean we don't appreciate you. Maybe, but I don't want to be criticized in my own home anymore. Then we'll apologize, publicly, in front of friends, whatever you want. We don't need an apology. We need action. What kind of action? My daughter-in-law asked hopefully. Find another place to live. Cassandra cried again, this time loudly and desperately. Dorothy, you can't do this. We are not enemies. Can one quarrel really destroy a family relationship? It's not a fight, I argued. It's a discovery. I found out what you really think of me. What if we change? Brian begged. What if we were different? People don't change overnight. And I'm 70 years old. I don't have time for experiments. So the decision is final? Cassandra asked quietly. Absolutely. The young men sat in silence for several minutes. Then Brian stood up. All right, he said stiffly. If that's what you decide, there's nothing we can do about it. But know this, you're destroying the family. I'm not, I said calmly. The family destroyed itself when there was no respect. And if we find another place to live and move out, will the relationship between us be restored? The daughter-in-law asked. I don't know. We'll see. So, you're willing to lose us forever over some words? I'm not losing you. You'll just live separately, like adults are supposed to. Brian headed for the door. Come on, Cassie. Apparently there's nothing more to talk about here. Cassandra stood up, wiping away her tears. Dorothy, I hope you'll change your mind. Family is the most important thing in life. I agree, I nodded. But a family should be built on honesty and mutual respect. And as it turns out, we don't have that. After they left, I sat at the window for a long time, thinking about the conversation. Was it cruel? Maybe. But after all the humiliation I had endured, considering it a manifestation of my oversensitivity, I had a right to be harsh. The phone rang in the evening. It was Stephen Craig. Mrs. Clark, I have good news. There are already 2 serious buyers for the house. They want to come back tomorrow for a second viewing. That's great, I said. When? 10 in the morning and 6 at night. Will the tenants be home? I think so, but it's not a problem, they know. See you tomorrow then. I hung up the phone and smiled. The house was selling faster than expected, so the young people would have even less time to look for a new place to live. But that was their problem, not mine. Tuesday morning, I got another call from Stephen Craig. The realtor's voice was filled with barely contained excitement. Mrs. Clark, we have a strong bid. A family from Winchester is willing to buy the house for full price without bidding. Cash. I sat back in my chair, digesting the news. Cash? 280,000? That's right. They were at the inspection yesterday, and they loved the house. They said it was the best condition they'd seen in a long time. They want to close the deal as soon as possible. How fast can that be? With cash, 2 weeks at the most. We just need to do the paperwork and technical expertise. 2 weeks. I was thinking about Brian and Cassandra. Yesterday they had hoped for a month and a half, but now it was 3 times less. Okay, I said. I'll take the offer. That's great. This afternoon, the buyers want to come with an appraiser. After that, we'll sign the preliminary contract. I'll be home after 2 this afternoon. That's perfect. One more thing. They want the house completely vacant, so the tenants will have to move out before the deal is finalized. Oh, I see. That's not a problem. After talking to Stephen, I sat down and wondered whether I should warn the young people about this turn of events. On the one hand, they should know. On the other hand, let them get used to the fact that their opinions no longer mattered. In the end, I decided to call Brian. After all, they were still technically tenants, and it was the right thing to notify them of their visits. Hi, Grandma, my grandson answered. His voice sounded depressed. Hello, Brian. I'm warning you. Buyers and an appraiser are coming to the house after 2 o'clock today. Buyers? The tone changed immediately. You mean someone wants to buy? Yes, and not just wants to buy, but is willing to pay full price. But you just put the house on the market on Saturday. A good house sells fast. Grandma, wait. What if we try to get a loan after all? Go to the bank, see if we can get something? Too late. I've already agreed to the deal. How late? You can back out. I don't want to back out. It's a very good offer. There was silence on the phone. How much time do we have? He asked quietly. 2 weeks? 2 weeks? But that's impossible. We haven't even started looking for a place to live yet. Then I suggest you hurry up. Grandma, you realize it's impossible to find a decent apartment in 2 weeks, right? Especially without any savings. Maybe we should have thought about it earlier. Thought about what before? We didn't know you'd suddenly decide to sell the house. We didn't know, I agreed. Nor did I know a lot of things. Brian was silent again, probably realizing where I was going with this. All right, he said at last. We'll figure something out. Of course you will. You're adults. After the conversation, I went about my chores, trying not to think about how the young people were handling the news. After all, they had created the situation themselves by talking behind my back. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drove to the house to meet the buyers. Stephen was already waiting at the front door, along with a middle-aged couple and a man with a briefcase, apparently an appraiser. Mrs. Clark, meet Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, your buyers. The realtor introduced them. The Thompsons turned out to be pleasant people in their 40s and 50s. He worked as a manager for a large company. She was a college professor. They were planning to move to Front Royal because of her husband's job. The house is beautiful, Mrs. Thompson enthused. We knew right away it was the right place for us. The condition is perfect, her husband added. You could see that the owners had taken good care of the house. I nodded and smiled as I watched Brian and Cassandra show the rooms with grim faces. Young answered questions in one-word answers, clearly unwilling to facilitate the sale. The appraiser scrutinized every corner, took measurements, photographed the utilities. He worked professionally and quickly. The condition is really excellent, he summarized after an hour. The repairs are of high quality. The appliances are new. The appraisal is in line with the price. Mr. Thompson nodded. Then we are ready to sign the papers. Excellent, Stephen said. We can draw up the preliminary contract right away. We went into the kitchen, where the realtor laid out the documents. As I studied the terms of the deal, I could hear Cassandra on the terrace trying to get the buyers to talk. Had you considered other options? She asked. There are a lot of good houses in town. Of course we did, Mrs. Thompson replied. But we liked this one the best. It's a good layout, and it's a quiet neighborhood. It's just that we've lived here for 2 years, Mrs. Thompson continued. We know the ins and outs of the house. Maybe we should think about it some more. What features are we talking about? Mr. Thompson was wary. There are no special features, Brian interjected hastily. Cassie is just worried about the move. I signed the papers and got a copy of the contract. The deal was set for the 15th of the month, exactly 2 weeks later. After the buyers left, the three of us stayed in the kitchen. The young ones looked depressed. That's it, Cassandra said. It's definitely over now. Not the end, but the beginning of a new life, I countered. What new life? Brian exploded. All we can find in 2 weeks is a hole. It doesn't have to be a hole, just something more modest. More modest? Grandma, do you have any idea how much it costs to rent a decent place? I have a rough idea. A one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood costs at least $200 a month, plus a $2,000 security deposit. That's almost $4,000 just to move in. You don't have that kind of money. Where would we get that kind of money? Cassandra exclaimed. We spent it all on living expenses, on fixing up this house, on furniture. Traveling, I added. I remember your stories about traveling. My sister-in-law blushed. Well, yes, sometimes we went on vacation. But that's normal for young people. Of course it's normal, but we had to think about saving. We thought we were going to live here for a long time, shouted Brian. We planned to save money little by little. Plans have a way of changing. Cassandra suddenly fell to her knees in front of me. Dorothy, please, please give us more time, at least a month. We'll think of something. We'll find the money. It was pathetic, but I was adamant. Get up, don't grovel. It's been decided. But where will we go? She cried. We have no options. Yes, we do. To your parents, to your friends, to a motel, finally. Your parents? Brian was horrified. I'm 28 years old and she's 30. We can't live with our parents. Then look for other options. And if we don't? You will. People find a place to live every day. Not in 2 weeks with no money. Then we'll have to compromise. Cassandra got up from her knees and wiped her tears. You know what, Dorothy? You're a cruel, selfish old woman. We took care of this house for 2 years, and you're throwing us out like garbage. Cared for? I asked calmly. Or did you just live for free? We invested in renovations to improve our own homes. That's natural. And the time and the energy? Those were your interests, too. You lived here. Brian grabbed his head. All right, enough arguing. We need to think about what to do. Right, I agreed. Think. Will you help us? Cassandra asked hopefully. Maybe you could lend us some money for bail? I gave her a long look. No, why not? Because it's your problem, not mine. But we're a family. Family is as much about rights as it is about responsibilities, including the obligation to treat each other with respect. We will be respectful, Brian exclaimed. I swear, never again. It's too late, I interrupted. Trust is not restored at the snap of a finger. Cassandra called me Wednesday night to tell me the results of the house search. She sounded desperate. Dorothy, we've been all over the city. All the decent apartments require a huge deposit, and the ones we can afford. What about them? They're horrible places. Crime-ridden neighborhoods, crumbling houses, cockroaches. But they're cheap. But how can you live there? I work with people. I have to look good. Then look for a better job. In 2 weeks? Are you serious? I'm serious about everything about this situation. What if we rent something temporary and then look for a better one? That's up to you. But we need money even for a temporary place, at least $1,000. Go to a bank. Banks don't give loans without collateral, and we have no collateral. Then go to friends, relatives. We've already asked. No one has that kind of money. It's a pity, I said sincerely. Dorothy, don't you feel sorry for us? I do, I answered honestly. But pity and principles are different things. Friday morning, Brian came to see me. Alone, without Cassandra. He looked terrible, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. Grandma, I have one last offer, he said, not even sitting down. I'm listening. We found a room in a private house. Not very good, but what we have. The landlady wants $500 deposit. We have $300. E, lend us $200. We'll pay you back in a month, I promise. And if you don't, we will, I swear. I looked at my grandson and thought, $200 was a small sum for me, but it wasn't about the money. No, I said. Why not? Because you have to learn to manage on your own. But it's only $200. That's right, it's only $200. You'll make it in a week. How do you make it in a week? Where? That's your problem. Brian stood there looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You're really not going to help? He asked quietly. Nothing. Not even if we end up on the street? You won't. You'll figure something out. And if we don't? You will. You don't have a choice. He turned around and headed for the door. You know what, Grandma? He said without turning around. Maybe you're right. Maybe we did say some really bad things about you, but you're doing a lot worse now. Maybe, I agreed, but that's my right. He left, slamming the door. That evening, Cassandra called me. Dorothy, we've found a way out, she said. We're going to move in with my parents in Richmond. Temporarily. That's good, I said. Family should help in times of need. Yes, family should, she repeated bitterly. It's a shame not everyone understands that. A week later, the house was empty. The young people moved their things out, leaving only the furniture that had been mine originally. The house was again as it had been before they came, quiet, neat, and a little sad. I walked through the empty rooms, remembering how I had lived here 2 years ago. Strangely, the house seemed foreign to me. I had gotten used to the apartment over the years, and it was impossible to go back to the past. 3 days later, the deal was done. The Thompsons got the keys. I got the money. The house was officially no longer mine. Stephen Craig congratulated me on a successful sale. It's rare to find such a quick and trouble-free transaction, he said. You had a golden house. I did, I agreed. Now it belonged to people who would appreciate it. The 15th came on a gray, rainy morning. I woke up early as usual, but instead of doing my usual chores, I sat at the window with a cup of coffee for a long time, looking out at the fall city. Today was the final chapter of my life, and even though the decision had been well considered, I was still uneasy. At 8 in the morning, Stephen Craig called. Mrs. Clark, everything's ready for the deal. The Thompsons are already at the bank, doing the final paperwork. We're meeting at the notary's office at 10 a.m. Okay, I'll be there, I said. How's it going with the house being vacated? The young people are supposed to move out this morning. They're moving out the last of their things. That's great. Then after the deal is finalized, we'll hand the keys over to the new owners. After breakfast, I packed my purse and drove to the house. I wanted to make sure that everything was going according to plan, and maybe one last walk through the rooms where I had spent a significant part of my life. As I pulled up to the familiar address, I saw a truck and some young men at the gate, carrying boxes and furniture out. Brian stood next to the truck and supervised the loading. Cassandra was nowhere to be seen. I parked nearby and watched the process for a few minutes. The young men, apparently Brian's friends, were working quickly and smoothly. They were taking out the couch, the chairs, the boxes of stuff, all the stuff the young people had accumulated over the 2 years they had lived in the house. Brian noticed my car and came over. His face was serious, but not angry. Hi, Grandma, he said discreetly. Are you here to make sure we're moving out? No, I said, getting out of the car. I just wanted to say goodbye to the house. I see. We stood there in silence, watching as my friends took out the last of their belongings. It was drizzling, and everything seemed gray and dreary. Where's Cassandra? I asked. She'd already left for Richmond with the first load of stuff. She's getting settled in. How are you doing? Did your parents take you well? They did, my grandson answered briefly. But there's not much room in the house. I had to squeeze into a small room, but it's only temporary. Of course, temporarily. You're young. You'll be back on your feet in no time. Brian looked at me with a scrutinizing gaze. Don't you have any regrets? No regrets? Regret what? That we're not a family anymore. About ruining the relationship over some words. I thought about his question. Did I regret it? In a way, yes. I regretted the way things turned out. But regretting my decision, no. Brian, I said calmly, words weren't what ruined the relationship. Words only revealed what was already there. Which was what? A lack of real respect and gratitude. For 2 years, I thought we were close, and it turns out you just put up with me for free housing. That's not true. Brian, don't lie. Not to yourself, not to me. We both know the truth. One of his friends came out of the house, a tall guy in work clothes. Bro, we're done. We got everything we needed out. Thanks, David. I'll be right there. My friend gave me a polite nod and went to the truck. The guy started the truck and started to turn around. Here we go, Brian said. That's it. The house is free. Yeah, that's it. We were quiet again. I could see that my grandson wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Grandma, he finally began, I realized that we were wrong. I realized that we said stupid things. But can't we forgive? Do family ties mean nothing? Family ties mean a lot, I said. But they have to be mutual. I'm ready to make it right. We're ready. We're ready now that we've lost our home. What about before? We didn't realize how much pain you were in. We didn't? I looked at him carefully. Brian, you're a grown man. Did you really not realize that calling your grandmother a burden and a pain was hurtful? He lowered his eyes. I guess I did. I just didn't think you'd recognize it. That's right, I won't. So you were willing to say mean things about me without me knowing. Not mean things, just complaining to each other. About the grandmother who gave you a house and helped you out regularly. Yeah, that was definitely worth complaining about. Brian ran his hand over his face. Okay, let's say we were ungrateful, but people learn from mistakes. Give us a chance to make things right. You'll have a chance, I said, in your own life, apart from me. So, you don't want to see us anymore? I don't know. We'll see in time. What if we change? If we prove we're different? Time will tell. How much time? A year? 2? Brian, I don't give deadlines. Either the relationship will recover naturally or it won't at all. My grandson paused for a moment, digesting my words. You know what the most frustrating thing is? He finally said. You treat me like a stranger. You forgot that you raised me, loved me, cared for me. I didn't forget, I countered. That's why it hurts so much. Then why don't you forgive? Because forgiveness must be earned, and you haven't done anything about it yet. We apologized. Apologies are words. I need action. What kind of action? What can we do? Learn to live on our own. Learn to appreciate help. Learn to respect those who love you. And if we learn to do that, the relationship will work? Maybe, but I'm not promising anything. Brian nodded and took the house keys out of his pocket. Here, he said, handing them to me. We won't need them anymore. I took the familiar set of keys and squeezed them in my palm. The metal was cold. Thank you, Grandma. My grandson looked into my eyes. I still hope that someday we'll make up, that you'll realize that family is more important than pride. Family is indeed more important than pride, I agreed, but respect is more important than convenience. And love? Is love more important than convenience? Of course it is, but true love includes respect. Brian sighed and headed for his car. Well, goodbye then. I don't know if I'll see you again. Goodbye, Brian. He got behind the wheel and started the engine. I stood at the gate and watched him drive away. He waved at me one last time from the window, but I didn't say goodbye. When the car was around the corner, I opened the gate and entered the house. The empty rooms greeted me with silence and the sound of footsteps. The young had indeed taken out all their furniture, leaving only what had originally belonged to me. I walked through the familiar rooms, remembering different periods of my life. Here is the living room, where my husband and I used to receive guests and celebrate holidays. Here is the kitchen where I cooked family dinners and taught little Brian how to make cookies. The bedroom where my son was born and raised, then where my grandson slept when he came for vacations. So many memories, so many years lived, and now it's all in the past. In the kitchen, I noticed a picture forgotten on the table. A picture of the three of us standing by the Christmas tree. It was last year, when the relationship still seemed warm and close to me. In the photo, we are all smiling, hugging, looking like a real family. The illusion was convincing. I took the photo and stared at it for a long time. Then I carefully tore it in half and threw it in the trash. The past had a place in the past. At 10:30, I locked up the house and drove to the notary's office. The Thompsons were already waiting in the waiting room, happy and excited. For them, it was a celebration, buying their own house. For me, it was just a business procedure. The paperwork took about an hour. I signed the acceptance certificate, received a check for the full value of the house, handed the keys to the new owners. Everything was done quickly and professionally. Congratulations on a successful transaction, said the notary, shaking my hand. Thank you. Congratulations to you too, he said to the Thompsons. It's a beautiful house. We're very happy, Mrs. Thompson replied. I'm a little sad that the previous owners had to part with it. It's not sad, I objected. Houses should belong to people who appreciate them. After the paperwork, the Thompsons offered me a ride with them to the house. They wanted to take another look at everything and ask questions about utilities, neighbors, peculiarities of maintenance. Sure, I agreed. I will tell you everything you need to know. We drove to the house in 2 cars. The new owners were delighted with every detail, from the layout of the rooms to the views from the windows. I showed them where the water shut off, how the heating works, told them about the neighbors and local features. And the family that lived here, were they good neighbors? Mr. Thompson asked. Quiet, I answered neutrally. They didn't cause any problems. It's a shame they had to move out. They must have been upset about the sale. They were, I agreed, but they'll get used to it. We finished our tour by noon. The Thompsons stayed in their new house, and I drove home. On the way, I stopped at the bank to deposit some money. The amount was substantial, more than I'd spent in years. At home, I made tea and sat in my favorite chair by the window. Outside, the rain was still drizzling, and passers-by hurried by under umbrellas. An ordinary fall day in a small town. I thought about the past events, about the decisions I had made, about the future. Was my behavior cruel? Perhaps. But after years of patience and sacrifice, I had a right to be harsh. All my life, I put my family first. I raised my son, then helped with my grandson, then sacrificed my interests again for the sake of the young. And what have I gotten in return? Contempt, backstabbing, being treated like an annoying old woman. Maybe Brian was right when he said family was more important than pride. but I didn't see it as a matter of pride. It was a matter of self-respect. And after 70 years of living, I had finally learned to respect myself. The phone rang in the late afternoon. It was a woman I didn't know. Mrs. Clark? It was Patricia Morgan, Cassandra's mother. I was tense. What did the mother of my daughter-in-law want? Speaking. I'm calling about the situation with the house. Cassandra told me what happened. E. She wanted to talk to you in person. Maybe we can find a compromise. What kind of compromise? The house has already been sold. Yes, I know, but maybe you could help the young people out with a place to live. Lend them some money for rent? No, but they're your family. Mrs. Morgan, I said patiently, your daughter and my grandson are adults. It's time they learned to live on their own. But in this situation, what situation? They're both working, healthy, young. No one forced them to spend money on entertainment instead of saving. They didn't expect you to do this, and I didn't expect to hear the way they talk about me. Life is full of surprises. The woman was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Clark, can't you forgive young people for their rash words? I can, when they've earned it. And how can they earn it? By learning to live on their own and treat their elders with respect. But that takes time. They have time, the rest of their lives. After that conversation, the phone never rang again. Apparently, all attempts to influence my decision were exhausted. In the evening, I sat by the window and thought about what had happened in the past weeks. Perhaps from the outside, I looked like a cruel old woman who kicked her relatives out of the house. But I knew the truth. I hadn't kicked them out. I had simply stopped being the convenient grandmother who tolerated any treatment for the sake of a phantom family unity. Brian and Cassandra learned a lesson that will probably make them better. Or not. That's their choice now. But I wasn't going to sacrifice any more of my dignity for their comfort. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some words can't be taken back. And some actions have irreversible consequences. That's called adulthood,